Welcome to the Virtually Speaking podcast. My name is Pete Fletcher, and joining me as always is my good friend, Mr. John Nicholson. John, how you doing, bud?
Claude, order my lunch. Claude, clear my calendar. Oh, sorry, Pete.
Nice, yes. It's funny you say that. We need to talk about that too. Claude has definitely piqued my interest. We'll talk about that later. But before we do, man, I'm excited about this one.
Claude, don't delete my backups. Claude, no.
Claude, make my lunch. Absolutely. Yeah, no. Most of the people that listen to Virtually Speaking are very, they're connected. They understand, they're in technology. So they certainly are no strangers to the world of AI and all the ups and downs, the hurdles, all the things. But I'm excited because this is somebody who's definitely in this space, who is an authoritative voice, in my opinion, in the community around all things cloud as well as AI. And so joining us again on Virtually Speaking is at this point a good friend of the show, Mr. Dave Linthicum. Dave, welcome back.
It's great to be here, man. I got the YouTube plaques behind me, so I know what I'm talking about. Certified. Okay. Yeah, those definitely did not come from some organization that just passes them out. Definitely.
I don't have one. I don't have one. Well, let's not kid here. So Dave Linthicum, he has the Cloud Computing Insider channel, which is where I first discovered him. That one is pushing almost 300,000 subscribers, which is pretty freaking impressive.
I like to round up to 500,000. Just saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the Common Core math would approve of that method.
Yeah. And then I noticed, this was actually recently, I saw you on LinkedIn talking about how you got your 100K subscriber plaque. And I was like, no. He's already way over 100. But then I noticed it's because you have another channel. And this channel is called Dave is Not AI, which I immediately subscribed, and really, really fun content on there, really interesting stuff. And so we could talk a little bit about that before we get started, but I will definitely start by saying some of my faves lately were your episodes just talking about sort of the fall that no one is expecting with OpenAI, which I found interesting. Sorry, chat, don't get mad. And then also some of the other things you talked about with Copilot and how people receive that. So maybe just give us a little taste on some of the stuff that you talk about on YouTube before we can get started.
Yeah, it's just basically the topics that I think are interesting and how it relates to the pragmatic use of cloud technology and AI technology. I think that's what the theme is. In other words, how do you make it work? And also telling the truth. I think there's a lot of hyperbole out there now, and ultimately people are trying to figure out how this stuff works and how to make it work for them. So, kind of focus on that and kind of have a little bit of fun on the way. So in other words, push the boundaries a bit, talk about what people are not talking about out there, kind of go against the narrative. And I think that's what people want to hear. So I'm going to keep doing it until I guess someone tells me not to or bumps me off, I guess. Possibility.
Yeah, I do. It's one of the things that is refreshing about your channel is you can definitely tell that you have your own opinion, your own voice, and it probably is not super popular to everybody. And I'm sure you get a little kickback, not kickback, but throwback or pushback, I should say.
I'll take kickbacks, by the way. I'm open for kickbacks. I can be bought. So yeah, bags of cash. You got me, man. I'll do whatever you want me to do.
Claude, send Dave money. Yeah. So I'd love to talk to you about, we've just finished a whole series on VMware Cloud Foundation Advanced Services, and we're going to be doing some other really cool stuff. John and I are getting ready to head out to a bunch of different events around the industry to talk to a bunch of folks about a bunch of different things. But I wanted to catch a moment with you before we got too busy and just get not a state of the union, but I'd love to talk to you about because I know you speak to a lot of customers, but you also speak to a lot of executives, like CIOs, infrastructure leaders, if you will. And I'm very curious when you talk to folks about AI strategy, where are people today? Because there's so many different things that you can do. And I know there's different ways to do it. And I've seen you talk about these things on your channel, and I would just love to get your take, maybe to start this conversation of where do you think enterprises are as it pertains to their AI strategies?
They're way behind what the hyperbole out there is saying. So if you listen to the vendors and you listen to the AI CIOs and Altman and all the other guys out there spouting AI, they're nowhere near what everybody is saying. They're doing experiments, they're doing trial and error. 95% of the things are failing. It's not failing because they're not necessarily trying, but they're trying and experimenting with generative AI systems, agentic AI systems, things like that. So it's small uses, typically LLM-based stuff that people are deploying. They're spending a lot of money on it, and they're trying to teach people, what they need to be doing, but it's nowhere near, what the tech press is saying. I think that's what I was kind of taking back. In fact, the chasm right now is so wide. I've never seen anything like it in my career. And I went through cloud, and I went through service-oriented architecture, and rise of the .com stuff, things like that. But it is not, something that is any close to reality right now, which is weird. Now, we will get close to reality, very much like the cloud was. People said, we're going to be in the cloud in a year. And, this is what Gartner declared, things like that. It's taken us 10 years to get the plot. And basically, enterprises are going to be moving at their own pace, doing the planning, doing the smaller projects, getting things up and running. They are going to get these systems up where AI is going to be a true force multiplier for the business and take the businesses to the next level. We're just not going to see that at the speed that everybody thinks we're going to see it at. Now, when the vendors are talking to me, and I do talk to the vendors a lot, they're telling me they're frustrated with the pace of adoption. In other words, they're pushing this stuff out. They're writing the white papers. They're, pushing the advertising up. They think they're creating demand. They're having these huge conferences everybody's going to. The NVIDIA one's coming up. That's going to be fully packed, I'm sure, with lots of people cheerleading for AI. They're just not seeing the adoption at the rate in terms of how the investments are going to be made. And so they're at a 10. The enterprises out there are maybe at a 3.5. And eventually they're going to be at a 6, but I think that's going to take 5 years. And I think that's the bad news, good news. I mean, the bad news is, the adoption is not occurring as fast as everybody thinks. The good news is we're also not making as many mistakes and wasting money, like we thought we do with AI. And so people are a little bit more methodical about it. They want to listen to architecture. They want to listen to planning. They want to get the people who are trained on this technology. I teach generative AI, architecture, and that class is completely full because people are trying to figure out how to methodically move this stuff and make it work. You got to remember, AI systems are 10 times the amount of money than traditional systems. So if I try to solve the same problems using AI and hopefully not force fitting it, it's going to be 10, sometimes 15 times the amount of money. So that's a huge amount of investment that enterprises are looking to make. And quite frankly, enterprises in many cases don't have the money. And when they do have the money, they're nervous in spending so much. So a lot of the stuff, hyperbole, some experimentation, but this notion like, some of these consulting firms are saying we're replacing, people with AI agents, things like that. That's just not happening at scale. It's a bunch of little cutesy pie projects. They're not fairly impressive. And I think that's where it's going to be for the next couple of years until we start seeing some better use cases and things like that. There's a few interesting things that are going on, but it is not at the pace, not at the adoption rate that everybody thinks it is. And I think we're going to have a normalization in the market, very much like in the cloud. Suddenly we realize oh, this stuff is going to go slow. It's okay. And we're going to see the same thing in AI as well.
I'm shocked and appalled that there's lies, damn lies, and vendor keynote, customer testimonials. There's been nothing like being in this industry and seeing people, at other companies' keynotes, being on stage, we're 100% on this. I was like, no, you're not. 80% of your estate's still on my platform and Microsoft's platform. What are you talking? It is. These hype cycles are interesting, but that does give me some optimism. What you said though, that people it sounds like they are failing a little faster, which maybe they'll find those which is good. Because the cost of these systems are so high, maybe they'll fail faster. The product market fit will come about. It also tells me that, we're still on the early side of realizing productivity, labor gains on this stuff. So the upside is there. What are you seeing as the biggest mistake people make in terms of going down of adoption, of trying a pilot and is it they go too long or too deep or throw too much money at one thing? Is it they pick the wrong platform or model, or the models aren't mature enough for the use case? Are they stretching too far for the value use case? Where are they going wrong, I guess?
That's easy. Use cases. They're force fitting a particular use case that seems to be a pet project they want to solve using AI. And you look at it, AI is going to be contraindicated for what they're looking to do. It's something that's fairly simplistic. We can solve the problem with a business analytics system, not necessarily force fitting generative AI. And so it's trying to force fit something into an AI.
Is this like ML, where it should have been like people are mistaking what should be a single query and some regex for machine learning? Like we're now doing that for AI. Like
Yeah.
they're overshooting complexity.
Generative AI is a derivative of machine learning. So we're just kind of taking the next thing to the level. So we're making very much the same mistakes. And I've been doing AI since the 80s. Since I've been 18 years old, I was a M1 programmer, Prolog programmer, things like that. And the big problem that we had with AI since then, and even the case now, is that it's applied in areas where it's not necessarily going to be effective, and it's not going to be a proper use case. It's not going to bring value back to the business. AI is very valuable technology. It's very powerful in what it's able to do, but you have to figure out how to apply it in the right use cases. And that's what people are missing out there. So they're not necessarily looking at the number of use cases that are available in the enterprise and trying to figure out where AI is going to be applicable and not. They have these pet use cases. I see this, I've been seeing this for the last 10 years, even when I was working at Deloitte, that they go, well, this thing is bound to use AI. And that's their pet project. And they go tell the CIO, I want this thing to be AI, whether it's a logistics system, inventory control system. They want driverless forklifts. That's one, I actually saw that in real life. And all these sorts of things where it's interesting and it's cool. And I understand why they want to build it and brag about it, but it has no chance of bringing any value back to the business. And that's where people are missing the mark. And I understand I'm designated buzzkill. I'm showing up to the meetings and saying, come on, guys, we're wasting money here.
What percentage of our COG is the forklift driver salary? Okay. Like, is he really taking that many breaks? Like, or could we, fix shrink on the retail side of the business or something else, I guess. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's just mismatching use cases out there. That's the primary issue. And spending too much money would be second, but the use case stuff is just crazy right now. And if you look at the MIT study and some of the other studies, that when you get into the cause and effect in terms of why people are failing, picking the wrong use cases is pretty much 80-90% of why the things failed. So AI works. It works just fine. It's going to cost you a bit more money. You need to have smarter people around to deploy it. But if you don't apply it to the right problem, you're just throwing money down the drain.
Okay. So I'm curious. I know cost is a huge factor for these things, and I think anyone can spin up an LLM and start to play around with these little tools and figure out, like, oh, this is cute. But like when we're talking about larger enterprise that are trying to truly make this part of the organization, I know cost is certainly a factor to be discussed, and I've seen a lot of the stuff that you've written about that. But what about some of the other concerns like security, that are a little bit more, real in terms of limitations for organizations?
Yeah, that's the big one as well. I mean, that would be, kind of the secondary thing. People will build these AI systems without understanding how to secure them. In other words, we have prompt injection and all kinds of, net new cool, hack, place attack vectors that people can leverage. And thinking about security planning around them is often missed. Normally, they're using traditional security tools and technology they already have in place, and it's definitely not a fit for the AI stuff. And even thinking about governance and thinking about the operation sides, those are typically going to be missed. So in other words, they're rolling something out without any kind of forethought in terms of how they're going to operate it, how they're going to do security operations around it, governance operations around it. And that means the system's going to have some weaknesses where you have to loop back and fix those things. And that's what's going on right now. People are rolling out these AI systems, and they're typically LLM based. They didn't invest a ton in building them or using Claude or ChatGPT or something like that, and a derivative application which is running on those platforms. But they're not thinking about the security. And so I see, kind of odd things like they'll take very private and data that's very sensitive and then drag and drop it, into an LLM, to get some sort of analyst done, some kind of ad hoc stuff, with no understanding of the security and the violation of compliance rules and things like that. And so that seems to be an afterthought. And I think the people who are actually experimenting with this stuff now almost feel like they're immune, from the law and from, security issues. And now we have to kind of think like, and I always say there have to be some more adults in the room, to get some of this stuff done. And I find this stuff all the time. The warning is, okay, listen, look, we're not doing a very good job in securing this stuff. You have assets that are going to be exposed through using these systems. And unless we figure out how to lock them up, then I wouldn't recommend that you deploy it. And it's that kind of stuff right now. And I understand it's a big bummer, but security has to be built into the system, systemically built into the architecture, not just added on at the end. And it's something that goes along with the architecture, something that goes along with planning. I always tell people, if you have an architecture team, you're going to need AI engineers, you're going to need an AI ethicist, you're going to need infrastructure person, you're going to need a security person, you're going to need a AI security person, by the way, not just a security person. You need an AI governance person, and you need an AI operations person, about 5 other things that you need. And if you don't have those skills on there, you're not likely to get to an end state that's going to be able to bring value. You're going to get to an end state that I'm going to have to show up and fix. And, my role in life, I think for the last 15 years was flying all over the world, fixing stuff, because a lot of that stuff was missed in the planning. We're seeing the same mistakes here. The big problem now is AI and its ability to see data and the number of attack vectors that are there. We're at a higher risk of breach, in my opinion. And I think the hackers out there are just figuring out how to breach these systems and how to use them. And there's a huge vulnerability right now. People are not building small language models in their own domain, even though that's what they should be doing. They're leveraging LLMs, cloud-based systems. They're not doing encryption. They're not doing identity access management. They're not doing data security processes. And it's causing risk. Risk is money. So.
Well, and I see it from the other side of like playing with these tools. I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like this is built, there's an AI built into my current tool, but this isn't federated. This can't search across all the data. Like on one hand, you've got, the need for this governance and these capabilities. But on the other hand, if it's scoped so tightly, or if it's not deployed at a broad enough level, then I'm like, okay, this was novel, but I'm going to have to manually go compare 3 documents in 3 places anyway. So why am I using this? I feel like we're playing ping pong there, and trying to find the Goldilocks zone is hard.
Yeah, we are. And I think that's, it's just the way we have a tendency to adopt technology, whether it was cloud, SOA, web, things like that. And we're going to have a certain amount of experimentation that's going to occur for the next few years. It started a year ago, when people got seriously and starting their AI projects. Now they're in the middle of the experimentation. It's going to take another year for them to finish before we start getting into some real uses of the technology. And a lot of mistakes are being made. To Pete's point, they're failing fast. I see a lot of failure out there, and they're learning as they go, but we're going to have to go through the cycle. I think in many cases, we're going to have to touch the stove. Not me, but people are out there actually implementing the AI stuff. They're going to have to make some major mistakes before they realize what they're doing, and the ability to kind of align best practices and methodologies into building best of breed systems. And we're learning as we're going, and we don't have enough AI experts to go around. And so that's what's causing a lot of the experimentation now. And I think it's going to end up with some pretty public failures that many of these companies are going to do.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I can see the attraction to using something that's out there already. You even mentioned it when you were talking about Copilot, for example. Copilot has not been very popular, and people have tried to use it. It's just not really working. And I think you mentioned something about how some folks had said, well, maybe you're just not using it right, or you need to take this and learn how to do this so you can use it right. And your response was like, I don't want to do that. Like, that's not what I'm here for. Like, this just needs to, I think people want to these things should be available to them, and I think so. I think there's I don't want to say a lack of patience, but I think there's this idea of like, this needs to work. So the easy way sometimes can be leveraging these maybe not secure or not cost effective models that are out there, as opposed to actually doing the things and actually having them somewhere that is, private and safe and built on your own data, which is not shared.
Yeah, and it's going the extra mile. And you're bringing up, the big problem I think we have right now, and that's shadow AI. Just like we had shadow IT and shadow cloud, back in the stuff. So everybody's using these AI tools for their own personal productivity. typically without knowledge and approval from the company overall. And people are taking a lot of risks with their with the company's data, and a lot of risks with the existing systems. And that's going to go on for a while. The Copilot stuff was just Microsoft making a huge mistake and trying to push LLM on everybody and anybody at all levels of their system. And now they have the user base that's up in arms right now, pitchforks and torches right now. And they'll eventually figure that out. But I think the big thing now is that people want to use the AI they want to use. They don't want to have something forced upon it. Right now, everything you use on this, like the STAM system here, you look up in the corner, there's always an LLM attached to it. It doesn't matter what it is. It can be an email system. It can be a word processor.
I was thinking the same thing on governance, because I was logging in for something for like work related to DocuSign. And it's like, hey, you want me to AI analyze your contract? I was like, did our AI like team tell them they could turn this on? Like, probably not. Like, they'd probably just turn it on for all the accounts. Or like, someone shared a document with Box, and Box is like, hey, want me to analyze your document? I was like, are you an approved vendor? I don't know. Like, all the SaaS vendors are trying to launder a model in.
It reminds me of Clippy. It's like, I see you're having some trouble with this. Can I help you with this?
That's the Copilot conundrum you mentioned, of where it's like, oh, I heard one of the Azure data centers got bombed last week. I'm like, I didn't know people, hated Copilot that bad. But it reminds me of Teams. I'm like, what is this? Like an infectious disease that's shown up? Like, they were touting the total number of users, that log into Teams daily. I'm like, it's on my PC and I can't get it to stop. Like, it's but product market fit, you grind away at something for a decade, you can make it stick. So what are what are you seeing from people who are getting delight in AI? Like, what is causing them to not have that, not have that reaction? How do you get that delight of the product you build, I guess, with it?
Yeah, and there's a lot of goodness there if you use it properly. I think it's people who are using it for their own personal productivity that kind of see the light that, oh, this is pretty cool. For example, I got to write scripts just like you guys do, plan shows, deal with outlines and, form letters and contracts and things like that. And all that stuff is done fairly fast with an LLM. So that's going to be the upside. So in other words, instead of me spending 5 hours a week, and I'm sure it was that or more, doing this as a small business person, it takes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and I get something that's fairly accurate and fairly safe. So that would be the upside. And the ability to have some of the AI stuff, which is truly going to augment some of the systems, the productivity systems, to add some value. What's going on right now is the technology providers are making huge mistakes. They're making way too many promises that are not possible. And they're pushing AI down the throats of everybody out there, and no matter what technology they're using. And they're doing so for a good reason, money, because the more AI...
Show the street, book revenue.
Yeah, they can go, this is AI revenue, look at this. And that's what we're selling. And I think that's not necessarily how you're going to win the game. People are a little fatigued out there. They're AI, and we're going to have to figure out, some sort of way to really kind of match the use of AI to the proper use cases of the person. We talked about the enterprise use cases, but I'm talking about the people use cases. And that's where most of the productivity gains are going to come over the next, 2 to 3 years. It's not necessarily going to be augmenting enterprise systems, but it's automating the tasks that the people do. We're not going to replace people, by the way. We're replacing tasks and automating tasks. And I think AI is really good at doing that.
Do you think there's going to be a lot of self-discovery with agentic workflows around like people automating? Because I think if I go to a median person enterprise, if I go to their boss and say, hey, what is your team wasting time on? But if I go to 10 people and I say, here's an agent, what do you hate doing and what wastes your time the most? And what, I feel like those people would know so much more than even their own manager, let alone their VP, who's going to be deciding, which model or path they go down. Do you think I guess that gets back to the governance and the other stuff. Like, are the people at the bottom going to be helping drive some of that? But I mean, how do you feedback loop that safely?
I think they have to, because the way in which they do their jobs and the way in which they should be automated is going to be different down to the individual, maybe the department. But it's something you can't throw a common use case, down on everybody who's leveraging this technology. And I think that's a bit different than when people thought. They thought they were going to be building and augmenting the logistics systems and inventory matching systems, and have driverless systems, and you have a revolutionary thing where all this stuff will be done away from humans and even displacing humans. That's not the case. This is going to be a very human problem that we're going to have to solve over the next 2 to 3 years. How they're going to use it effectively, understanding how to use it, And that's where the productivity gains are going to be there. And we're going to, like I said, we're going to automate tasks, not people, not replacing people. And enterprises aren't typically focused on that right now. They're looking at AI as a strategic imperative for the company, which is fine, but not understanding how the rank and file are going to be using this to the better productivity gains. And that's where they're going to see the value in the short term as well as the long term.
If you can get everybody 25% of their time back through cutting out some of those large wins, then hopefully you can realign that labor. But you got to get management away from looking at how do I let go of 25% of people, or how do I not hire 25% more, versus look at general, force multiplier productivity gains, NPS score wins, whatever that'll be. You mentioned earlier training small language models. That's something that I was actually playing with recently. I was playing with a local LLM tool that will actually let me run a model on my iPhone, and not the Apple foundational model. That thing is terrible. But actually try some of the other frontier models, try some of Google's and things like that. And I've actually been pretty impressed with that. You mentioned talking about people training their own small models. Where are you seeing that requires going out and getting cards, or doing things how are you seeing people make that journey and pick that model and pick what they want to start with or distill? Where are you seeing some stories with that?
Yeah, that's where the the successes are right now. And so it's not with using some sort of an LLM, as a back-end system that can do everything, include write a song about my general ledger, that comes out of the system. But it has a particular
write a limerick, yes.
Right. It has a very narrow focus that's going to solve a particular business problem. So these wars are going to get won with systems I can build with 3 to 6 months and do with 10 to 20 people in terms of a project team. And those are typically going to be small language models that have the value, because guess what? I'm going to train the small language models with my data. And they're going to have a very narrow set of behavior and understanding and knowledge that they're dealing with, which is going to be useful to me. Nobody else.
So they haven't been trained on Marx or Das Kapital or something. They're not going to start a revolution in my factory.
No.
They're focused on the really boring task you've thrown data at them on.
Yeah, you tell it everything, give its inventory information and sales information for the last few years, find commonality and patterns on there, and then solve a particular narrow business use case. That's where the wins are going to be ultimately with this technology. Everybody's too enamored with the LLMs, and they're really kind of, doing big moonshots, and that's not necessarily understanding how these things are going to work for them. So that is where the successes are going to be. I teach my generative AI architects with an understanding that we're moving to small language models, very small, very narrow use cases, and that's what people are going to be implementing in a few years, because that's where we're able to solve the problem and bring value back to the business. It's not going to be these moonshots that everybody is, attempting right now. And it's not typically going to be LLM based stuff. The LLM is going to augment the use of our small language models. In other words, we may need to look at logistics information and then compare it with weather patterns and buying patterns, which we don't have. It's external data. And by the way, it's amazing that we can get at that information and then bring it into our own domain for usage. But it has to be compared with our data. And our data needs to be our data. It needs to be owned in our system. It needs to be bound and coupled to the existing applications that we have. And that's where the battle, is going to be won. And there's enterprises that are seeing that now, that are moving in that direction. They're the ones that I'm seeing successful with this stuff. In other words, they're not doing the big moonshots. They're doing very small tactical projects, typically less than $1 million, but they're getting a business problem solved, inventory optimization, logistics management, things like that, and using AI and generative AI capabilities to do that, but they're doing so in smart ways. Not very impressive. In other words, you're not going to, show it as a use case, because it doesn't have these big bang things that everybody's looking for the AI system. But what it does in its use of AI is going to be just right for the people who are using it. And I think that's where the value is going to be. And that's where people are finding right now.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of exciting things. I mean, agentic AI is certainly exciting. Model context protocol. I'm curious and this essentially is my final question for you, but I'm just really curious, if you're talking to CIOs and business leaders, what would you tell them for this next wave of AI? What should they be doing now that they're not doing?
Yeah. Number one, calm down. It's okay that you think there's a party going on and you haven't been invited. Number two is just spend the time doing the planning and doing your as-is assessment of what your architecture is, inventory your data, because the data is going to be a foundational problem of this. This AI is not going to work unless your data is in good hygienic shape. We have a single source of truth, all that kind of stuff. You have to understand that. None of this is going to work unless you fix your data. Assess your data, assess your existing systems, and then pick the use cases that you think are going to be valuable. Put your planning in place, and then get your folks trained. That's my advice to them right now. And and understand that we're going to do this in an incremental way. Lots of little battles are going to win the war. Let's put in priority order what we need to address and how we need to address it. And I think that's what's missing right now. So people are going to, like, the NVIDIA conference is coming up, which ends up being, a pep rally for AI. And they come back with all these grandiose ideas, but it's not necessarily right for them. It may be right for somebody. And it's cool technology. And I really like it when people talk about AGI for the 1,000th time and how it's just around the corner. But the reality is we need to solve very pedestrian problems with this stuff. And we need to figure out how it's going to add value. And that's it. And it's not a tough thing to do. It's just going to take some problem solving and take some planning. And people have to be willing to do it. Some enterprises get that. They're just not good at doing it. I hear that from my CEO clients a lot. In other words, Dave, I get everything you say. You're absolutely right. Love reading your stuff. Congratulations on your 100,000. No, they don't say that. But they go, that is going to be a 2-year slog that we need to go through. And we don't know how to do that stuff in longer term. We just know how to chase technology, because that's all we've been doing. We've chased the cloud, made some miserable mistakes there. And we chased other technologies over the years, and we want to chase AI. And eventually we're going to just have this center of excellence. They're going to run after AI, and we're going to figure out, some use cases for it and do the best we can, probably overspend the money and get the value out of it. But that's what they're doing. And sometimes you can't change cultures. That's what they're going to do. But, my advice to them is change cultures. Because guess what? This is not like cloud, where you're going to spend 2 or 3 times the amount of money, versus a traditional system. This is going to be 10 to 20. So this is putting you bankrupt.
I'm sorry, sir. The price of memory is updated this morning. It's now 30 to 40. So
I know. Well, that's the other thing. AI has been driving the cost of hardware up, but just the cost of AI and what it takes to do. And I price these things all the time. It's 10 to 20 times that, generally speaking. And I've seen 30, and I've seen it go, as low as 9. But it's incredibly expensive when you look at the cost of making this happen. And at the end of the day, we're a business. We have to figure out how to get ROI out of this stuff. And if we're going to spend $100 million on this AI stuff, we have to figure out how we're going to get, $300-400 million back, in a couple of years. And that's what's missing right now. They don't understand how that's going to occur. And it's picking the use cases, doing some planning, things like that. They'll get it. Enterprises will pretty much figure it out, just like we find, it took us 15 years to figure out cloud, and now people are repatriating. They're going to make a lot of mistakes. They're going to run up a lot of technical debt, and a lot of stuff is going to have to be corrected in flight. But you can do a tremendous amount of damage with this stuff, just because how much money you have to spend. What I'm getting back from my clients is like, Dave, this stuff is expensive. And I was like, yeah, it is. And if you're going to do it on cloud-based systems, things like that, you have to figure out how you're going to do it in the most economical way possible. So you look at alt clouds, private cloud providers, things like that, as alternatives from where the crowd is moving right now. And you have to think differently, which is what people are not necessarily doing now. Some are, most are not. Eventually they'll figure it out.
I love that. Really good stuff. I know we don't have you for too long, but how can people get in touch with you and learn more about the awesome Dave Linthicum?
Yeah, and just, look me up on LinkedIn. And I got a paper I did out there on why private cloud is the control plane for sovereign cloud computing. Take a look at that. Search on that for LinkedIn, and check out my stuff and let me know how you're doing.
Yeah, I will be definitely throwing links below, as well as in the show notes of this podcast. If you're listening to this, jump over to the YouTube for all the details as well. Dave, as always, thanks for joining us. We love having you on, and we look forward to the next time.
Thank you very much for having me, guys. Thank you.